here we are. This is Sex Love Psychedelics, and I'm your host, Dr. Kat. Bringing you psychosexual conversations that will leave you intellectually turned on and hungry for more.
Oftentimes the concept around sensuality, like I'll get students or men reaching out to me because wanting to cultivate more sensuality, but there's also a hesitancy around that because they are afraid that that will make them more feminine or make them unattractive to women. How do you approach men with that, about that conversation, or how do you help support them in that?
Well, the first thing is like, maybe it will make you unattractive to some women. You don't need to be attractive to every single person in the world. That's unrealistic and probably not the greatest thing to want anyway. So firstly, it's to acknowledge that fear that it might turn some women off, and that's totally fine. And, you know, and there's nothing you can do about that really. Yeah. I kind of, maybe this, I don't know if this sounds harsh or not, but like, I kind of share with guys, you shouldn't necessarily be doing things for women. Like, you shouldn't be doing things because they turn women on. You should be doing things because they turn you on, right? And because they like feel your cup up, right? And like that, like, I don't know, that maybe that sounds harsh, but like, that's kind of my belief is like, if you're feeling good about yourself, if you're doing things because they feel juicy and sexy and alive for you, then your partner, whoever that is, will be attracted to that quality, right? And that's the people you will attract into your life, people that like see that part of you authentically. And the people that see that part of you and they're like, no, that's not for me. They won't enter your life because they'll see that part of you and be like, well, yeah, no, I'm going to pass on that. And so you're kind of like self-selecting people based on just like living in that authentic space of like, if sensuality and sensitivity is what you really want to explore and you're doing that, then the people in your life either are going to be repelled by that and you're never going to see them, or they're going to be attracted to that and they're going to be the people that you want in your life. So I don't know. But beyond that, I guess like, you know, there is something to be said for like sensuality and sensitivity. You know, I've spoken to so many women that like, they say to me, their like favorite memories or the best lovers they've had have been men that have been attentive and attuned to and sensitive and like embody their sensuality and their eros and like are able to tap into that and hold that. And they said they, you know, and again, these are women that sleep with men, I suppose. And they say that like, they can tell when they've got a male partner or a lover who like isn't, and the difference between the two like is like wild for them, these women that I've spoken to. Yeah. And so like, if that isn't like encouragement enough, like if you're a guy listening to that and you're like, oh, like maybe I was going to explore my sensuality, I was going to explore my sensitivity, you know, my eroticism, but I'm not sure, like, will women like it? It's like, women can tell, right? And and they'll know that you're embodying pleasure and embodying sensuality, and it does make you a better lover, in my opinion, based on the conversations I've had with women. And again, not all women, and that's totally fine and valid. My encouragement for men beyond that as well is like, you know, similar to what I was saying before, is like, you don't want to be reliant on other people for your sensuality, right? You don't want to be reliant on your partner for your pleasure. You also don't want to be reliant, this is semi-related, you don't want to be reliant on like porn for your pleasure. You don't want to be reliant on an external stimuli for your pleasure. You want to be able to generate that from within you. And so part of like cultivating sensuality is tapping into pleasure and recognizing that it's generated from within, that like it comes from you. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Like no one else is responsible for your pleasure. You're kind of responsible for it. So, so taking like the time to explore sensuality in whatever way it looks like for you. I think we also get, and I say we, like collectively, the royal we, because I get caught up in this as well, of like sensuality has to look a certain way. I need to go and have a bubble bath. That's on my mind because I just had a bubble bath last night. But it's like, you got to have a bubble bath and like light scented candles, and, you know, you get the warm oil out, and great, you can do that as well. But sensuality looks really like whatever you want it to look like. If it like invokes sensuality in you, then it doesn't matter what it looks like, right? It could be, you know, going out, and I'm looking out my window at the woods right now. So it could be going out into the woods and like putting your hands in the earth and tilling the soil. That could be a very sensual experience, right? It's like literally engaging the senses. You're smelling the rain, or you're smelling the bark, or you're feeling the earth, whatever. Sensual experience could be like doing some creativity, maybe some getting your paint out, and instead of using your paint brushes, using your fingers and doing some finger painting, and just like listening to some music. That could be a very sensual experience for you. I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but like that idea of like cultivating sensuality and what feels like it's sensuality for you uniquely is the important part here. Don't get trapped into thinking like, oh, my polarity coach online said this is what sensuality looks like, so now I've got to go and do that. You can try that and maybe take it on board as inspiration, but if it doesn't look like that for you, it's totally fine. That's okay. And I extend that as well to like masculinity and femininity as well. It's almost like it's people like ask me, I get asked a lot, like what's my definition of masculinity? Similar question, like what's my definition of sensuality? What's my definition of masculinity? And my answer is never like this is what it is, because as soon as I do that, it becomes prescriptive, right? And then whoever doesn't feel sensual in that way, or whoever doesn't feel masculine in that way, then gets ostracized from that definition, or gets left out of that definition. So I don't think masculinity exists. That's usually my answer to that question. Masculinity isn't singular. It isn't monolithic. And so, the second part to that question, or that answer, I suppose, is masculinities exist by the hundreds, right? There's so many different versions of masculinity. And so like exploring the type of masculinity that feels right for you, or like exploring what makes you personally feel masculine, is what's really important here. And again, you'll see so many people prescribe dogmatic, restrictive versions of masculinity. And if you don't do those things, if you don't protect, provide, preside, be assertive, be dominant, all these things that, are very like 1950s masculinity, which is funny to me that people call it traditional masculinity. And then it's like only from less than 100 years ago. But that's another conversation, I guess. Like exploring things that make me feel masculine, for example, is like two juxtaposing things. Like I've got a fireplace and I go and chop wood, and moving my body in that way makes me feel really masculine, right? Makes me feel like a fucking lumberjack. And I love that. But also playing with my son, like I said before, that playfulness, that pleasure, that enjoyment, that also makes me feel like a really fucking good dad. And it makes me feel really masculine, makes me feel really paternal, makes me feel like, a different type of masculinity, right? Because again, masculinity isn't this one thing. It's this multiple, multi-layered, variable experience. And so those two things, some people in those men's workspaces might call one of those masculine and might call one of those effeminate, or might call one of those feminine, and demonize one and valorize the other. But I don't like that. And I don't think it's really helpful. I don't think it's really healthy. So, so this is the long-winded way of saying, explore how it feels like for you in your body. And I know it's tough, but try not to take someone else's values or someone else's descriptions of an experience and like place it upon your own experience. Because then we start comparing, and then we start like, falling into the trap of like, well, I'm not masculine enough. I'm not doing enough.
Shaming.
And totally. And it's like, as soon as we do that, like there's such a one-upsmanship mentality around like men in Western society. And so it's very hierarchical, right? And so like if I'm not as masculine as this person, then I'm less than this person. And there's a lot of like, there's a lot of self-worth issues for guys. And it's probably one of the major reasons I believe that a lot of men bully other men, that a lot of men denigrate, a lot of straight men denigrate queer men or gay men, and demonize anything that's considered feminine, because the hierarchy is femininity is less than masculinity. And so if I'm doing anything that's not masculine, it must be feminine, and therefore I'm less than, and therefore I've got to do something to get myself back into masculine. And for a lot of guys, that looks like being aggressive, or it looks like being hostile towards someone who's considered or perceived to be less than them, right? And so they push someone down in order to feel that they're pushing themselves up the hierarchy up.
Well, that was fun. Thanks for tuning in, lovers. And if you want to experience more ecstasy and sexual liberation, head over to sexlovepsychedelics.com and learn about how you can join me for any one of my online or live events. And while you're there, grab my free guide on sex and psychedelics. Remember, this podcast is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Please contact your healthcare provider and local law before pursuing any of the products or psychedelics discussed. And one final note here. I make this show specifically for you. If you're loving the show, then be sure to leave me a review in iTunes or Spotify to let me know. Happy to be here and happy to serve. I'll see you next time on Sex Love Psychedelics.